A few weeks before my first son was born, someone mentioned to me, "One can tell a woman's progress in labor by how she responds to humor." It says a lot about my personality that I said to myself, "Why, what a capital idea!" My wife was in labor for 3 days with our firstborn. During that time, she graduated from college. In order to assure her seat on the end of any row in her double-frocked gown, and if she wasn't frocked in the first place, she wouldn't need a double-frocked gown now, she had to be first in line. During the speeches, she stood to the side to relieve contractions. An EMT came over and asked if she was okay. "Labor contractions," she said calmly, and his eyes got big. He hurried off, and a lady EMT came back and stood beside my wife. No words were spoken, but she kept an eye on the potential problem. The next day, my wife sang in the church choir with a nurse on either side of her, one being retired. They told her, in no uncertain terms, "Don't you dare break water on stage." Finally, tired, but with a great deal of anticipation, the day of the blessed event arrived, and we were allowed into the birthing room. As my lady Goodwife was acclimating herself to the room, I asked, "Why do cows have bells?" "I don't know," she said. "Why?" "Because their horns don't work," I said. At this, my wife said nothing. She sighed and might even have rolled her eyes. This is early labor, where humor is tolerated, as it normally is. Hours passed. Labor progressed, and my wife was sitting in a bathtub with warm water jets massaging the muscles cramping in her back. By this time, I'd learned when her contractions were hitting. Those were the times when she'd squeeze the marrow out of my fingers. Knowing she was between contractions, I asked again, "Why does a cow have a bell?" She turned to me and projectile vomited. She was quite annoyed because my body reflected her stomach contents back into the bathwater. This could bring infection to her unborn, so she had to get out of the tub. I cleaned my clothes off as best I could. This was mid-labor. Time passed, and the contractions became closer together and more intense. At one point, her mother offered to hold her hand, and my wife pushed the tiny hand aside, saying, "Your hand I might break, Mom. His hand I'm not worried about." Even when she was in pain, she knew she could count upon my strength and support. About 10 minutes before my son was born, I asked her again, "Why do cows have bells?" The doctor and the nurse both looked at me as if I'd materialized from the planet of putrid people, and my wife said, and I quote her, "Because her arms on earth." Later, she said that she had quadruple vision from squinting so hard. I believe her. That was our first child, and he tipped the scales at 10 pounds and an ounce. A few contractions later, and my son was born. I held my son in my arms for the first time. My heart melted. The volcanic heat of ancestral imperative moved in, and a new commandment was written on the temporarily softened stone of my heart. My son, a part of me, but separate. I would help him grow. I would guide him. Protecting this new life was now my priority. That doesn't mean I wouldn't tease him. My soul was bent to a new task, not more beyond all recognition. Child rearing happened, and no parent does this perfectly. One does one's best, and it is never enough. Love covers a multitude of flaws. As the saying goes, spackle and paint make a carpenter what he ain't. Decades passed, and my son got married. In the fullness of time, his wife gave birth. With newborn murmurs coming from the warmly wrapped burrito in his arms, my son whispered to me, "I did good, Dad." Just before she gave birth, I asked my wife, "Why do cows have bells?" My knees liquefied. I sank to the floor. The lightning had jumped to the next generation. I knew he'd be a good daddy. He'd make mistakes, and he'd love this new little person with all of his heart. Perhaps it isn't lightning. Perhaps it is the experience of a quantum heart growth spurt, the sudden realization that more love was going to be generated than you'd ever dreamed was possible. This cow joke is sacred to me. not because it's funny, but because of the part that it has played in the history of my life. May you be as blessed